Hi everybody, in this video I'm gonna talk about whether or not Bulgarians speak Russian. So according to a Wikipedia article I read, 23% of Bulgarians have working proficiency in Russian. Russian, just like Bulgarian, is a Slavic language, so a lot of things in Russian and Bulgaria are very similar. Some words are exactly the same, but the languages have different grammar and different structure, but overall they're quite similar. So I'll just state a few facts and a few things about Bulgarians and Russian. Before '89, which was the communist period in Bulgaria, everybody studied Russian as a foreign language in school. And also at that time we only had two channels, two TV channels, I believe, and one of them was the Russian channel, the state Russian channel. So everybody was exposed to the language. However, even during that period, you did not, as a Bulgarian, you did not practice Russian at all. Spoken Russian was very, very limited because there were very few Russians in Bulgaria at that time, and even nowadays. So actually, even if you learned it, you never actually practiced it, or at least the majority of the population. Of course, if you were working in a company that traded it with Russia, or you work in a Russian company with an office in Bulgaria, or some of those types of situations, yes, of course, maybe you practice your Russian, but for the majority of the population, actually people didn't actually use it on a day-to-day basis. Bulgarian is and will be the official language in Bulgaria, so everything was in Bulgarian. Although my dad told me back in whenever he went to college, like maybe in the 60s, he actually used he was studying like mechanical engineering, and actually one of the books he was using was in Russian, because at that time Bulgarian science wasn't that developed, so they just had to use a textbook in Russian, simply because there was not one available in Bulgarian. Just like with English nowadays, English is very commonly used in science, and maybe in some fields you need to read an English textbook, because maybe if your language is not so widespread in the world, maybe they don't even have that textbook in your language. So that was the situation back in the 60s. After the changes in '89, when I went to high school, I had an option to choose two foreign languages when I went to high school, and a Russian actually could not have been one of them. I actually happened to study Russian and English in high school, but I could have easily picked German and English, or French and English, or Spanish and English, something like that. Although in some schools actually only a few foreign languages were available to be studied, simply because for example with Spanish, actually Spanish was not available in my high school. I think only French and English and Russian were available as foreign language subjects in high school. So if you work in the service industry or tourist industry in Bulgaria, Russian could be very useful, because there's a lot of Russian tourists in Bulgaria. So in some companies probably it's expected that it's very beneficial if you know Russian, because you can help the Russian tourists with who are visiting Bulgaria, make their stay kind of smoother. But outside of these areas, really, unless you somehow manage to practice your Russian, I think the vast majority of population doesn't speak Russian to you know, as a working proficiency, at a working proficiency level, or doesn't speak it fluently. Of course, you know, many of us that have grew up in the communist period, you know, actually, you know, remember some of what we studied. And of course you hear Russian, you know, here and there. It's a quite widespread language in the whole world, so we have some exposure to Russian, but actually, you know, we really don't use it at all. You know, if you're in Bulgaria, you speak only Bulgarian, and if you're somewhere else, you know, you speak still Bulgarian. You don't use Russian at all. So, you know, I personally would, if you know, if I don't work in the tourist industry or service industry in Bulgaria, if I'm just walking on the street and a Russian approaches me, asking me something in Russian, I'll try to respond first in Bulgarian and try to explain to him or her something, and see how they understand me. And if they don't understand me at all, then maybe I'll try to use a little bit of Russian, of what I can remember, you know. But again, it's my Russian, and a lot of people's Russian is not fluent at all. So actually, we make a joke of that, because we kind of for example, we might not know the word in Russian for something, and we might say the Bulgarian word, or we might say the Bulgarian word with some kind of a Russian pronunciation, and we hope that, you know, it's the correct one. But you know, of course, you know, Bulgarian is written in the Cyrillic alphabet, and it's easier for Russians to understand Bulgarian. And you know, I think for any Slavic speakers, once they're exposed to the other Slavic language for a little bit of time, they would start picking it up, you know, quite fast. You know, for example, I was just reading some random Czech text. You know, I've never studied Czech, or I never really spoke Czech, but the more I read it, the more I understood it. You know, even some words that are not the same as in Bulgarian, when I see it in the context used, I can actually, you know, figure it out. So I think for Russian speakers in Bulgaria, if they are exposed to the Bulgarian language, they're going to start picking it up. An interesting fact is that just about a decade ago or so, there were less than 10,000 Russians in Bulgaria, and now I just saw the latest figure. It's like up to like 30,000 Russian citizens in Bulgaria out of the current resident population of 7 million. So Russians are a very small, you know, percentage of the population in Bulgaria. But there's a lot of Russian tourists and Russian-speaking tourists, like maybe from Ukraine and other countries that visit Bulgaria. So in the tourist industry and sector, you know, you would probably you would find more Bulgarian-speaking Russian, simply because to help tourists, you know, for practical purposes. But if you intend to live in Bulgaria, if you're from Russia or Ukraine, or, you know, some other countries that use Russian, you know, you're expected to learn Bulgarian, because everything is in Bulgarian, and they're not going to accommodate you to offer, you know, like if you go to court, you know, everything would be in Bulgarian, and if you go to school, you know, unless it's I think there's a few, there are some Russian foreign language schools, just like their English language schools or German language schools, French and Spanish and Italian. Unless you go to a specialized Russian language school, the majority of schools in Bulgaria use Bulgarian as a method of instruction. So I hope you found this helpful. please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and if you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.